Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. This snow apocalypse is still going on here, folks, but it has been wonderful. I haven't left the house in a few days. The kids have not left the house. That's the one thing I like about a snowstorm, as long as you don't lose the power, is that it causes everything to just stop and be still. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the snow. And so as I've been hanging out here at home, slowing down a little bit, I got to thinking about the shortages that I noticed at the store, and specifically bread. I guess snowstorm, milk and bread, I don't know. And so I got to thinking about what would I do if I couldn't find the food that I needed to feed my family. And so I am a cook. I like to cook. I am no baker. I am no baker. I could make cornbread out of a box mix, and I can make muffins out of a pouch mix, and I can open a can of biscuits, but nothing from scratch. So I got to thinking about how I would love to start learning how to incorporate some scratch made breads or anything like that, baking ideas that's very cost effective, because I think that if there was a time that we couldn't get to the store, as long as we had a few simple staple items, we could still feed our family. And so I got to looking around my pantry. I was out of all-purpose flour. I usually keep that on hand, but I did have a bag of self-rising flour. And so I researched and found a recipe for a 3-ingredient bread. It only calls for self-rising flour, salt, and milk, and very little milk at that. And so I thought I'd give it a try, and I'm gonna bring you along with me. So let's get to baking some bread.
So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this self-rising flour, and the recipe calls for 2 cups. This is a 1/4 of a cup measuring spoon, so I'm just going to do 8 of these. But anyway, this recipe calls for 2 cups of self-rising flour. You can also find recipes like this with all-purpose flour. Just when you use all-purpose flour, you are going to have to use either a yeast, a baking soda, or a baking powder. But for this recipe, I had self-rising flour, so this is what we're using. Next, I'm going to add in 1 teaspoon of salt. And then the recipe calls for 1 cup of milk. So I added that in. Now, I think sometimes it depends on the recipe, but this recipe called for 1 cup of milk. So I go ahead and I take my spoon and I give this a stir. And what I'm looking for is for this dough to come together and kind of start forming a ball. Now remember, this is the first time that I am making bread from scratch, so I'm kind of learning as I go. So I'm just stirring all of this together. I'm wanting to incorporate the dry mixture with that milk and get this to form a dough ball. My mixture was a little too liquidy for me, so I added a little bit more flour in there, and just to get it to stir, because I want the dough to start sticking to itself and to start creating that dough ball. And you'll see that start to happen here, and that's what you are wanting. You're wanting it to form a dough ball. Here I felt like the mixture was a little dry still, so I added a little drop of vegetable oil, because there was no fat that I had added to this, and this wasn't part of the recipe. I just did it to make myself feel better, I guess. But as you can see, as I'm stirring, the dough ball is starting to form. After this, I added a little bit more flour so that I could start kneading the bread. Now, the idea here is to get that dough ball to become consistently smooth in a dough ball and not stick to my fingers. And you can see here in the beginning, it was sticking to my fingers. But I just kept working the flour in. I kept kneading that dough ball, and I just wanted to make this into a smooth ball. So that's what I kept doing. The one thing that I will say here is that, to be honest, I felt like giving up around this point. I was like, this is so sticky, it's not coming together. But I just kept kneading and kept kneading. And I will tell you, with bread, just don't give up. Like, the more I kneaded, you can see it here, the more the bread kept coming together. And so just don't give up. Stick with your bread. It's going to come out great. So I had previously been preheating my oven to 375 degrees. I put my Dutch oven in there to preheat as well. It looks like it's not clean, y'all. I promise. I have scrubbed that thing clean. This is just the love of cooking. And so I put a little bit of oil on the bottom, and I'm going to take this dough ball that I have, and I'm going to gently place that in my preheated Dutch oven. Now you can see the size of it compared to the bottom of my Dutch oven. And so I kind of press that down a little bit, and then I'm going to take a knife and just score across the top. That just allows it to have room to expand. And I'm going to put that into my oven. I'm going to cook this covered at 375 for 30 minutes. And then after 30 minutes, I'm going to cook it uncovered for 15 minutes. And like I said, this is my first time, so I'm excited to see how it turns out. So let's see. So again, I cooked it at 375 for 30 minutes covered, and then took the lid off and cooked it for another 15 minutes. And this is how it turned out. I put it on a cooling rack for about 10 minutes. I covered the top with a little bit of melted butter. And here you can see I'm slicing it, and it is delicious. It turned out to be the most wonderful crusty bread. I am so proud of this bread. I cannot tell you how excited I was about this bread. It was so delicious. We had this with some broccoli and cheddar soup and dunked it into the soup. It was amazing. Y'all, that bread was so good. I'm not kidding you. It was so good. You definitely need to give it a try, and you can definitely do it. It was easy, it was delicious, and it was probably less than like 50 cents to make that bread. It was so easy. So I think you should try it. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time. Bye.